Welcome back to Love in the Wild. I am here with Sophie, who is a marriage and relationship expert who helps reconnect relationships before they fail. So, today on Love in the Wild, we're really digging into what if the relationship you're ready to walk away from is actually the one that could be the safest, most fulfilling connection of your life. We're living in a culture that says if it's hard, leave. But what if the real power is learning how to stay without losing yourself? So today I'm joined by Sophie, who helps couples rebuild emotional safety, restore attraction, and turn distance into real connection. We're talking about what it actually takes to save a marriage, not the cliches, not the quick fixes, not the things you see on social, but the internal shifts that change everything. So if you've thought maybe this just isn't my person anymore, this episode might be change how you see your relationship. Welcome to Love in the Wild, Sophie.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a pleasure.
Of course. Can you dive deep, give people an overview of how you got into this space? What really fueled your passion for helping couples reconnect?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always had like a huge interest in relationships, always had an interest in how the mind works, psychology. Even from college, I was fascinated with why people do what they do, behavior. I worked in prisons, inner city schools, just really curious about why people behave the way that they do. But I wasn't really able to link the work that I was doing and learning into my own life with my own relationships. And what drew me to relationship work initially was just breakup after breakup and trying to figure out like why am I attracting the wrong people into my life, and when the right people come into my life, why am I sabotaging, and why am I leaving the right people and staying with the wrong people? And so I did a lot of like personal work around that and really found it super fascinating, but never thought that I would make my life out of relationships until I thought that I had relationships sorted out. I got married, I had 4 children, everything was fine, or so I thought, but we were on a really slow decline. And the year that I had my fourth baby was also the year that my younger sister died of cancer. And I was just completely overwrought with grief. And my marriage at that point completely fell apart. And my husband said that he wanted to leave, he wanted a divorce, and he did leave. We did end up separating. And having a partial separation. But when he left, I was like, "Oh my gosh, I am experiencing the same situation as I did when I was dating," which actually I had experienced as well in my childhood. And I need to figure this out now, because if I don't figure this out, like really figure it out once and for all, it's going to keep chasing me. And I went to a therapist. I talked to the therapist, and he was like, essentially, "Sophie, there's nothing that you can do. If your husband says he doesn't love you anymore, it's over. There's nothing that you can do at this point." And I just wasn't getting the right information. So I went on a quest for a year to figure out how to save my own marriage and what really makes marriages work. And little by little, I turned my marriage around, brought back the connection, and in the process, like really healed myself. And then naturally, organically, I decided that I wanted to help other people do the same and train to be a relationship coach. And the rest is kind of history.
That is such a testament to what you're doing that you actually lived what you teach other people to do. And I have so many questions that I can't wait to get into on this episode, but I saw that you have the relationship miracle method. And I guess let's just dive into like if you're at that point where you guys are separating or you're very rocky, what kind of like first steps do you need to do to fix a marriage, like repair a relationship?
Yeah, exactly. So relationships, in my experience, tend to have like their own entity, like they have their own energy to them, right? So we have us, we have them, and then we have like the energy of the relationship itself. And it has its own momentum. And in my experience, like momentum tends to pick up in the negative direction pretty quickly towards the end of a relationship. And so it will get progressively worse and worse and worse. And it will bring out like all of our triggers, all of our fears, all of our insecurities, all of the things that we were really good at hiding at the beginning of the relationship will really come out at the end of the relationship. And so if you want to save your marriage at the point where it feels like it's hopeless. You know, if we've kind of gotten to that place where someone's moving out or someone's separating, then in my experience, you need like a real pattern interrupt. You need someone to say, okay, we're going to start to do things differently, or I'm going to start to do things differently, because somebody needs to shift the trajectory of the relationship because it will continue to go down. Does that make sense?
Yes. It's almost like the age-old saying of, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results is the definition of insanity, or maybe I'm completely botching it, but it's the same
That's
thing.
it.
Like, you have to, if you wanna get into shape for summer, it's not gonna happen by eating a couple pieces of pizza every night for dinner. Like, you have to shock the system and say, "Nope, this is actually we're changing the habits, things that we're doing, and we're going to redo it."
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of stick with the analogy of the pizza, you know, what people tend to do is when they're in that relationship breakdown, they blame the pizza, right? They're like, the pizza needs to change. Like, if only the pizza was like lower in calories, then I would be losing weight, right? And so that's what people do in their marriages. They're like, well, he needs to change or she needs to change, you know? And if she does this, then I will do this. And so they get stuck in this like real blame game, blaming the other person before they do anything to change how they're showing up in that moment.
Yeah, I got divorced and I was dating for a while and, was picking up kind of the same kind of guys. And just reflecting on myself, one of the biggest things for me was having boundaries and like still putting myself first. And that's one thing I kind of regret being married that I wish I would have almost like pattern disrupted in the system. I stopped putting myself first. And, there was a lot of there were things on his end that, we don't necessarily need to go into, but where I should have just interrupted and been like, I don't care if this, disrupts the system. I'm still going to do it anyways. And it would have been very hard to do, but moving forward, like in dating, that's like a non-negotiable for me. I'm like, that's what I figured was my problem in the marriage where I could have fixed it or saved it or, and so I'm like, moving forward, this is a non-negotiable. Like, I'm not losing my own boundaries for a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And so many people do that. They lose themselves in the relationship and they kind of put their spouse as like the reason as to why they've lost themselves, right? They're like, I've thrown myself into the relationship. He doesn't want me to do what I want to do to take care of myself. And they stop like prioritizing themselves. And then they become so deeply resentful towards their spouse for something that they weren't doing for themselves, if that makes sense. Right. And
Yeah.
so and I think that's, like, exacerbated when we have kids, right? It's, like, tenfold because then it's like, "Well, I don't have any time to do this." And in my experience, men don't have that, like, guilt as much. They tend to put themselves first much more than women do.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I look back and I see that like pattern disruption of it would have been, maybe more fights, it maybe would have been more friction, it maybe would have been more whatever, but I actually think that that would have been something that would have been really good for the relationship to, maybe it wouldn't have changed anything, maybe it would have, but a pattern disruption I feel like to your point is such a like huge point. And then what would you say is there a point where you know that a relationship is just broken? Like, it's broken beyond repair, it's not going to change.
I think that it's kind of case by case. I think it's personal, you know? And I think that if someone comes to me, for example, and we work together for a long period of time, a year or something, and they're doing everything right and they're showing up in a way that with the right tools and the right skills, and they're consistently showing up in a manner that would be conducive to a healthy relationship, and their partner is just like, I am not gonna change. Right? I'm not gonna leave that affair person that I'm having an affair with. I'm not gonna stop, put down the addiction. I'm not gonna do any of those things. Then I believe that after that period of time of significant effort towards change, if it's not working, then it's probably best to walk away. But I've also seen relationships come back from situations where I was like, there is no way this relationship is going to work. I've seen relationships come back from divorce papers being signed. I've seen relationships come back after people have been divorced. So I think
Wow.
it's just so deeply nuanced and I think it's deeply personal. I think as if there's any violence, domestic physical violence, like that's obviously like a no-no. But within like a healthy relationship, I definitely think it's like case by case basis.
Yeah. And when you're working with people, are you working with couples? Are you working with individuals within the relationship? And is there a certain time frame that most people kind of it clicks and they can start moving in the right direction?
Yeah, absolutely. So I work with individuals. I work with people who want to start to create the change on their own, and I work with couples too. So I work with women, we have a women's program, and then men, we have a men's program, and then I work with couples. And so I see that the minimum amount of time that people need to make significant change is 12 weeks. 3 months is
Wow.
usually when things start to like click and shifts start to happen within a relationship. But I always say to people, like, it's really the deeper the hole that you've dug, like, the more ground that you're going to need to fill that hole. Right. So if
Mm,
someone's out and that you're separated and, it's going to be harder to turn that situation around. It's going to take longer than it is for someone that's just got disconnect in the relationship.
that makes a ton of sense. The 12 weeks doesn't seem like a long time.
It's not long, but you'd be surprised. People come to me all the time and they're like, "Sophie, I don't have 12 weeks. Like, you need to fix this today. Like, it has to be fixed by the end of the week." I'm like, "It's not that's not gonna happen," you know?
Like, I'm not a magician.
Yeah, and I'm like, "How long has this been going on?" They're like, "It's been going like this for 5 years." I'm like, "And you want it fixed in 1 week?" It's not gonna be 1 week.
Oh my gosh. So how do you deal with kind of those, like, unrealistic expectations? Like, do you just walk them through and be like, "I don't know what to tell
Yeah.
you?"
Well, it's part of the anxiety and the scarcity and the fear, right? And when someone's in that amount of like fear and anxiety, they're making all their decisions from fear. And so that's what's actually contributing to some of the problems in the relationship in the first place. So it helps to like break down like this is you want to fix this super quick. You're putting way too much pressure on the situation. You're pressuring them. They're feeling the pressure. Like actually it's gonna go quicker if we back up and we slow this whole thing down. So once they can see, like, the process, they usually calm down a little bit.
As someone who's very
Mm.
anxious, I've been in those, like, cycles where, even if it's not a relationship, just focusing on trying to make a decision out of fear and scarcity and being like, "This needs to happen right now," and then you can, like, take a step back and calm down and be like, "Okay, I can actually, do 12 weeks and it's gonna be fine."
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So, do you think that the version of you who wants to leave is showing the unhealed version of yourself?
Me specifically or just generally?
Just in general, like, speaking of like that anxious fear and scarcity where you're like, this isn't working, I need to leave, either on like either side, either party, just being like, I need to leave right now. Like, this is the end.
Yeah.
Mic drop, done.
Well, again, I think it's nuanced, right? Because I think that there are some people that might have stayed for 25 years and been emotionally abused, and they're finally like, "I'm out," right? And that's actually their strong intuition that they're finally listening to, right? But I think that for some of us, it's just the defense mechanisms kicking in, the fight or flight, and it's like, "Okay, I gotta get out of here. I've gotta remove myself." And we as humans, like, we're always programmed to survive. So we're going to want to run away from difficult situations. And most people don't have the tools or the skills needed in order to be able to have some of the hard conversations, to even know what they're running from. They're just running because
Mm.
they're in pain. And what tends to happen is people will run out of the relationship and they still feel the pain because it wasn't always the relationship that was causing the pain. It was just the relationship that was reflecting the pain back to them that they were carrying.
That's really powerful. And I think, when you're going through something difficult, if you have a sickness or, maybe you're struggling with weight or things that are a little bit more common, you're immediately going to go to someone who knows what they're doing. If you have a hair problem, you're going to go to a hairdresser. If you're having skin problems, you're probably going to go to a dermatologist. But for some reason, and to your point of, having these hard conversations with your spouse, you're just like, I'm going to figure it out on my own. I'm going to speak from the unhealed version of myself, or we're just going to see how it goes, or I'm going to go to social media. This is how I should respond. When really you need to have a coach and you need to have someone that, maybe a little bit more partial to the situation and say, this is the healthy way to handle it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. But for some reason, with marriage, It's just one of those things that people feel like we just should know how to do, you know, but we have like financial advisors. We, like you said, we have health coaches. We have, if you want to learn a new skill, you go to somebody that knows how to do it or someone that's done it before you. But when
Mhm.
it comes to marriage, it's like, I can figure this out on my own, right? Like relationships, people feel like they should just be able to know how to do it, but they don't. People don't realize, and I know that I didn't either because I had seen a grief coach when my sister was dying. I had coaching for other things in my life, but when my marriage was failing, I was like, I don't know what to do. You know, I'll read more
Mhm.
books. I'll listen to more podcasts. I'll try talking to him more. I'll go try take him to a therapist. You know, none of that was actually working. And I hadn't even thought that marriage coaching was a thing. Like I didn't know that it even existed or that there were ways that you can get help.
Yeah, until I found your page, I had no idea that that was a thing. I think, and maybe you can shine some light on this, like, what is the difference between going to marriage counseling or, like, a therapist? Because typically that's where people would go at the very end. They're like, "We're just gonna go to therapy," you maybe waste $150 per session to vent and get it all out, then you leave and you go back to reality. How is what you're doing different?
Yeah, so the difference really between the therapy is kind of what you said, and like there's amazing therapists out there. I've been to lots of therapists, like my mom was even a therapist, so like have lots of experience in that setting. But personally, and what I've heard from my clients is that therapy, you go and you talk about the problem. Right. And you experience all the feelings of having those issues. If you're in a couple session, you're sitting next to your spouse and you're telling the therapist all the things they've done wrong. You're feeling it all over again. Your body's re experiencing it. They're sitting there and it can become like the therapist can become like a referee between you and your spouse. And because you brought all of this baggage back to the surface, you end up leaving the room feeling worse than you did to begin with, and then taking it home and not knowing what to do about it and getting into it over and over again. And individual therapy, in my experience, I would go to my therapist and I would just complain about what my husband was doing and what he wasn't doing. And then I would go home and I would pick a fight with him. And he was like, every time you come home from your therapist, you're like out to get me, you know? And I was like, I would be riled up. I would be like, ready to get into it. But she wasn't teaching me. She wasn't calling me out on my stuff,
Mm,
right? Because you're bringing one side of it
yep.
completely into the session and you're like, he's this terrible human. And I've got all of this evidence to show you what a terrible human he is. And they're like, oh man, that sounds so hard. That sounds so hard, and then you leave and you're like fueled up by what a terrible person. And so, I wasn't being called out. I wasn't being asked, what do you actually want here? What do you want to change? Like, where do you want your relationship to go? I wasn't being guided in a direction of like what I actually wanted. I was just circling the drain, right? I was circling the same problems over and over again, making no progress, making things a lot worse.
Yeah, and that was my experience with therapy too. I was like, "Okay, so we're coming together. We both obviously want change, but then we go and we just kinda stand on our soapboxes and we say our problems, and then it's like you go home and you're sitting next to the person and you're like, "Well, you just said all that stuff about me in therapy," and you don't have the tools, like, to actually work on it, to take a second and pause and reframe our mind because I always say there's 3 sides to every story. There's his side, her side, and the truth. And the truth is somewhere in between how he interprets it, how she interprets it, and, how they're 2 people are just reacting to the same situation. Yes. And then, you bring in, a girls' night or you go talk to your mom or you go talk to, someone that you're close to, and that just, like, further perpetuates the same feeling because it's almost like we don't want in that moment, we don't want this our best friend or our mom to call us out and tell us, but I think I'm more like you where I'm like, "No, tell me where I'm wrong." Like, I wanna know where I'm being too much and where I can work on it because it's like, I'm obviously causing like, not I'm adding to this. Like, it's not just one person, it's like a combined effort. So, speaking on, like, the whole modern dating. It's like this whole thing. It's such a big shift because we have social media in mind and we have, romantic comedies and we have, all of these little things in our ears. Like, do you think that society is almost training us to say, like, let's run, go to the next best thing. If this is hurting you, move on. Yeah. Do you think that there's any mindset shifts to get away from, that resentment when you're at that point where maybe you feel like you're roommates and you're just going with the status quo? It's like it's too expensive to divorce, it's too difficult to separate. So you're basically just like at that roommate phase and you're like, I absolutely, pardon my French, fucking hate you. Like, just stay on your side. I'll do my life over here. Like, are there starting off mindsets that you can say, maybe I don't actually hate this person? Maybe I can find that love for them again. Right. Yeah, it's true. Like, I think something that's really lovely about a relationship is that you can see that person's worst, but then you also want to show them your best too. Like, to your point, the trying, putting on makeup or looking cute and being like, kind of like flirty in the kitchen. And then you can also, have your bad period days where you're like in the baggy sweatpants and you're like just eating chocolate cake in bed. It's like the beauty is that you actually give someone that access to see, every side of you, but you're also still trying to show them the best version of you too. And what do you think creates emotional intimacy? Maybe you're like the flirting, but like, yeah, that tracks. That makes a lot of sense. Are there any things, continuing talking on like love as a verb that people can do to safeguard their relationship? Is it like going on a date once a week or is it, sending a flirty text message? Like, how do you keep the spark alive without getting to the roommate phase? No, sorry. Um, Yeah, it's almost like, you wanna maintain a relationship before it gets to that point that it needs to be repaired. And correct me if I'm wrong, like, I'm thinking about this, when you have kids and you're either, like, maintaining the relationship or you're kinda drifting away. When you're not like, because people are naturally going to change. They're going to, get a job promotion and it's gonna require more time, or they're going to find a new friend group and they're gonna find new hobbies. And is it like, how do you navigate someone changing within a relationship and finding that way to continue to love them? No, that's totally fine. And we can wrap it up soon so you can save your voice also. And I've noticed that, in interviewing other people on like the whole modern dating. People are so concerned about their career or what they look like, or, they're like, he has to be 6'4", he has to make, $200,000 a year, he has to want to go to the gym, he has to be doting on me, he has to do all these things. And the same goes for men seeking women, or, I'm speaking from like what I see from a woman's perspective. And it's like if you find that, you go on Hinge and you can say, I want someone who's 38 years old and, to 48 years old. And he has to be 5'11" to 6'4", and he has to live 20 minutes from me and this and that. And you can like tailor the exact specifications of a person that you're looking for. Go off of looks and you're like, "Oh, he's cute. Oh, he's not. Oh, I don't like this picture." And, you're basically like crafting this type of relationship. And it's interesting to see and hear kind of what you're saying about if you love them at a soul level, you don't love them just for them at face value, then no matter what they do, if they change, they get really into golf and they start spending their Saturdays at a golf course, or they're like, I wanna be a bodybuilder and I wanna put on 100 pounds and, whatever. It's great to know that this, like, modern dating cycle is not like, we're seeing it on social media, we're seeing it on reality shows, but it's not sustainable. Yeah. I noticed, like, in my 20s, I was more so focused on the amount of money, and it wasn't so much like you had to be making a lot, but it was like their job makes this much money. And then when I got into my 30s and I really realized I like more if they're like entrepreneurial or if they're a go-getter or if they're like, I have this job, but I really want to work on getting promoted. Like it's an inner drive that once I broke it down within myself, it was like, it isn't about the money. It's about the drive that they have. Like I'm very driven myself. So, it was like I want someone to also have a similar drive or at least understand that my drive isn't gonna go away. Yeah. Yes. And, same with going to the gym. It's like I like being outside. I like, going on walks. And I want someone who prioritizes health. They don't need to be in the gym 24/7 because that's not me either. But like, if I'm like, hey, do you want to go on a walk? They're like, yeah, sure. Like, or let's plan a family vacation that has physical activity involved. Like once you kind of, and I think it's a great exercise for anybody to do is once you figure out what you like, maybe from more of a superficial external trait, it's like, why do you actually really like that? Like, why do you like someone or why do you want somebody who's a high earner? Is it the actual amount of money? Is it that they pay for your dates? Is it that they're driven? It's like, why? Like, what's the reasoning why behind it? And I think that goes into like a long lasting relationship. Yeah. I love that. Speaking of writing, you mentioned that you are writing a book. I would love to hear a little bit more about this before we wrap it up. That is so exciting. I'm really excited to see when this comes out. And I I love that your work is based off of real life experiences. Like you're not just preaching from a soapbox. You're like, this is actually what worked for me. We're separated. We were going through a hard time and we healed and we repaired our relationship. Yeah. And there's the vulnerability aspect too. You're talking about bringing something intellectual down to your heart and you don't know that vulnerability until you've actually lived it and you say, it's going to suck. You're going to sit in these feelings and you're going to feel weird sending a flirty text message to your husband. You're going to be maybe anxious. You're going to go through all of these emotions. And you know that because you went through it. So, where can people reach out to you to work with you, either by themselves, with their spouse? Um, you know, and learn more about what you're doing. Perfect. I will put your information in the show notes so that people can easily click and follow you because you provide a lot of like small actionable items. Like just even like thought starters. If someone maybe isn't ready to work with you, but they're noticing that I'm pulling away from my partner or maybe I can do this quick actionable item. Like you really post good kind of like jumping off points that I think are really valuable for people. No, it's totally okay. But, if this conversation stirred something in you, just let it, sit with it, be a little bit vulnerable because pressure to change everything isn't going to work. This is your permission to try again with more awareness, honesty, and compassion for your spouse. Real connection isn't found, it's built, and sometimes it's rebuilt, as Sophie is a testament to that. So thank you, Sophie, for reminding us that love doesn't end when it gets hard. That's when it gets real. And there might be something so much better on the other end of it. So to everyone who's listening, you're not behind, you are not broken, and it's not too late to create something deeper. Until next time, we will see you soon.